any genocide that in any way is attacking, disrespectful, does not recognize the ultimate tragedy that the Armenian, that the Greek, that the Kurd, that the African, that the Yugoslavian has endured. And I do not like the way you speak about people. About Iraq, are you aware that yesterday the government of Iraq executed Chemical Ali? Why? Because Chemical Ali was responsible for using poison gas and killing 5,000 Kurds. It was the cousin of Saddam Hussein and was his closest cooperative person.
Okay, I mean...
Right, yes. Did Iraq have weapons of mass destruction, Mr. Charny? As your government whipped up the hysteria around the world, that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and presented an existential threat to Israel? And while we're at it, Mr. Charny, when you list all the people who suffered, how about the 1 million Iraqis who are now dead? Do you include those in your list?
Gentlemen,
and how about including the 1,400 Palestinians who you killed in Gaza? And how about including the 1,400 Lebanese who you killed in the summer of 2006? And now you want to wage another war on Iran? And you think I am going to let you, in the name of my parents' suffering, drag in their bodies, their suffering, so you can whip up another hysteria against Iran and maybe blow up the whole Middle East in the process and kill millions of people? I really think you ought to stop. I think Israel ought to stop.
Peter,
all right, I think Israel, I'd like to go back to Jerusalem, please. I'd like to go to Jerusalem. Please go ahead, Israel.
Right. My answer to most of your invective is that I am committed to the lives, the dignity, the protection of all human lives. I make no distinction between the dead peoples of any people. They are all tragic, and the evils that brought them about are to be condemned.
Okay,
I do not hear that kind of caring about human life from you, Finkelstein. I hear from you a blind attack on Jews and Israel that goes on day after day and year after year. I resent it and I condemn it.
Excuse me, Mr. Charny, I never mentioned the word Jew. You dragged it in. Now you're going to start with the anti-Semitism weapon? Okay, let me quote from Norman Finkelstein. Now you'll start with the anti-Semitism weapon? Here is a quotation from Norman Finkelstein. It says here that you said, Jews who want to be decent human beings have to renounce being Jewish. Norman Finkelstein, Radio Islam. That's preposterous. Did you say that? You know, excuse me, Mr. Charny, I hope your scholarship isn't on the quality. I hope your scholarship isn't on the quality of that quote. The quote is utterly preposterous. I never said it. And I hope you're going to issue an apology right now. Well, then you ought to talk to Radio Islam and complain. I don't even know what Radio Islam is.
All right, gentlemen, I think we're really getting off the point here, and I want to ask Israel. Norman has made the claim that there are people making money off of the Holocaust. Now, do you think, is that true or not? Because he documents it quite well in his book.
How about starting with the Swiss banks? Do I think that
Spielberg made money off of Schindler's List? I am sure that any number of people...
I think he's talking about a different form of generating income. Norman?
Mr. Charny knows full well what I'm talking about. Let's start with the Swiss banks. Mr. Charny heads a center called Holocaust and Genocide Studies. First of all, I don't know why Holocaust is separate from all other genocides, but let's leave that aside for a moment. As the executive director of that center, Mr. Charny must surely have heard of the name of Raoul Hilberg, who was the world's leading authority in the Nazi Holocaust. In fact, he founded the field of Holocaust studies. Now, Mr. Hilberg said and documented in the last edition of his 3-volume history of the Nazi Holocaust, he said and documented that American Jews used the Holocaust as a blackmail weapon to extract monies from the Swiss banks. that all the claims that were made against the Swiss banks were false. Now, I'd like to hear Mr. Charny reply
All the
to
claims?
Mr.
Okay.
Hilberg's claim.
All right,
that
let's go to
Mr. Hilberg's claim
Israel, you can
that
reply
it
to
was an extortion racket.
Okay, Norman, you made a very clear point. Israel, we're running out of time. How do you reply to that?
My reply is that when I first heard and read of Norman Finkelstein criticizing the use of the Holocaust for money-making, I respected that critique. I do know of such things, and of course I'm opposed to them. When I then went on to hear and read Norman Finkelstein as a traitorous, insulting, nasty human being who doesn't ever stop from attacking Jews, the state of Israel, or the memory of the Holocaust, you have destroyed the validity of the partially correct point that you made.
Okay, we're running out of time. Norman, you got 15 seconds to finish up. Go ahead.
Yesterday, the Some Jerusalem Center, one of those corporate entities of the Holocaust industry, released a new report. And it said that nearly half of Europeans believe that Jews use the Holocaust for financial gain. And now Israelis
Norman,
are going around the world.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you. We've run out of time here. I want to thank both our guests today, Norman Finkelstein and Israel Charny. And thanks to our guests for watching us here on RT. See you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules.